Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Friday, June 10th, 2022, and today we are going to be talking about the state of Utah and brand new numbers from this state from Dan Jones and Associates. So they worked with the University of Utah Institute of Politics and news companies to get a general idea and understanding of where the state of Utah is right now for their 2022 U.S. Senate race. Now, we haven't been talking about it much, mainly because there really isn't much to be competitive in the state of Utah. Congressional redistricting officially turned their one quote-unquote competitive district, normally a very solidly Republican district, but Democrats have started to do so well in the Salt Lake City region that they have made a district competitive. Congressional redistricting has cut out the competitiveness of that district, turned it into a Republican plus 30 district, so now we're left with a very Republican state, has a Republican governor, has two Republican senators, and all four of their representatives being Republicans, yet now the state of Utah potentially has a competitive Senate race. Now, I made a video talking about this maybe a month ago, talking about Evan McMullin. His name might ring a bell because he ran for president back in 2016. Now, he's deciding to run for Utah Senate as an independent. Not a Democrat, not a Republican, but as an independent who represents traditional conservative values. Now, the interesting thing about this is that the Democratic Party in the state of Utah normally would be vying for this Senate race. While they haven't won a Senate race here in decades, they would be running alongside an independent candidate, meaning that there would be a lot of vote splitting. If there's one GOP candidate in a very solidly Republican state, it becomes very easy to see how the Republicans get out ahead. Because as Donald Trump knows, and as many other Republicans do, you don't need to win a state by a majority, a plurality is fine. But what the Utah Democratic Party did was remove themselves from the ballot altogether. In a vote from the state convention, they declared that they would not nominate someone to be on the ballot and rather endorse independent candidate Evan McMullin. McMullin is by no means a liberal, a leftist, someone who could resemble a Democrat. If anything, he's a Republican who simply doesn't like Donald Trump. He has been a lifelong Republican. He represents many of the conservative values that we've seen in the state of Utah, and the only real thing that offers him this level of electability is that he ran for president in 2016 as an alternative to Donald Trump and did extremely well, especially for someone who entered into the race in the final few months of the campaign season. So, Evan McMullin, someone who was on the ballot in 2016, is going to be on the ballot again, this time uncontested from groups that otherwise might oppose the GOP. So now it's a race between an independent and a Republican. But how do we even get to this position and point where a Republican senator in a solidly Republican state ends up in a competitive race? Well, this happens due to unpopularity. This happens due to the fact that Mike Lee, as the incumbent, isn't performing as well as he might have liked, and is certainly falling out of favor amongst his own constituents. Number one, Donald Trump's association with Mike Lee has really started to hurt him. When Donald Trump won the nomination back in 2016, Mike Lee really grabbed onto him. Initially, he didn't want him to win and pushed away from him as many other Utah Republicans did. Donald Trump being one of the worst performing Republicans by margin in the state of Utah in quite some time, in decades even, which is really bad for the former president of the United States. But it was worse for Mike Lee, who associated himself so heavily with President Trump that now, 6 years after he won his election by 35 points, is in a position where he could actually lose his Senate race to an independent who opposed the one person Mike Lee is very closely alongside. Donald Trump's endorsement in the state of Utah doesn't help. This is not a name that is popular or very, very adored across the state as maybe Mitt Romney's might be, or another Republican who seems to mix and work well with the high Mormon population within the state. The point being, Donald Trump's rhetoric and actions don't line up with the values of Utah voters in a way that many other Republicans had, that McCain had, that Bush had, that Romney certainly had. Romney carpetbagged across the country, moved to Utah, and became a U.S. Senator. Things like that don't happen unless you're liked or adored across the state, and it certainly wouldn't have happened for Donald Trump. And his association with Mike Lee, what this does is makes Mike Lee look as if he is a huge and staunch Trump supporter, which he very much is. He worked for Donald Trump's re-election bid, led it in the state of Utah, and ensured that Donald Trump would win the 6 electoral votes within the state. Even though it was pretty much secured, Mike Lee decided to associate his name with it, and that's only done damage to his brand. As you can see here now, in the state of Utah, Mike Lee doesn't exactly have the high approval rating you might expect. The state of Utah went to Donald Trump with nearly 60% of the vote in the last election. The approval rating for Mike Lee, just 44%. The disapproval rating, good news for him, lower than the approval rating, 36%, but about 1 in 3 voters, in fact more than 1 in 3 voters, disapprove of Senator Mike Lee's job in the U.S. Senate. To do a little bit of walking back, Democrats typically don't perform higher than about 25% of the vote in the state of Utah. 2004, Kerry got 26%. 2008, Obama got 34%, which was high for a Democrat at the time. Considering everything else, though, it made sense. Democrats had a phenomenal year in 2008. Fast forward to 2012, Obama wins just 25% of the vote. Clinton wins 27% of the vote. Biden doing numbers that we hadn't seen in Utah for a Democrat in quite some time, 38%. One of the best numbers we've seen for a Democrat, I think, dating all the way back to Bill Clinton, not even Clinton. Clinton getting low numbers there. I guess, for a very significant period of time. Let's see, the last time there was 37%. We're getting a little bit off track. I guess the fact that we can't even find it is really shocking and alarming and showing that President Trump wasn't really someone. Back 1968 was the last time a Democrat hovered around 37% in the state of Utah, and Biden still did better than those numbers. But the fact we had to go all the way back then and go through decades of elections to even get to a point where Democrats were viable within the state to 37%, not even viable, but losing by 20 points, is a testament to how conservative and how Republican this state is. And if a Republican senator can't do that well, primarily because of his association with a more unpopular figure, tells you that that has done significant damage to Mike Lee's brand. Mike Lee's name is well recognized, it's well known, but I can't exactly say it's well liked. And taking a look at these new numbers from Dan Jones and Associates, I can't agree either. Because they do a matchup, because there is no longer a Democrat, what we used to find actually, before we get into it, is that the Democrat was typically lined up with independent Evan McMullin and Republican Mike Lee in the polls. For instance, you can take a look at these numbers from OH Predictive Insights. Now, they do a lot of data, specifically in this Sunbelt region. I typically refer to them when I'm looking at Arizona numbers or Nevada numbers, but in Utah, they decided to do a poll on February 14th. And what they find is that in a head-to-head race between a Democrat, any Democrat, Mike Lee wins by 20 points. That makes sense. Mike Lee, on the other hand, though, I would say it's a little unappealing to his reelection, but that he is at just 45%. As an incumbent who had been elected multiple times across the state, who knows these voters, is well recognized, and has the Republican title by his name, why isn't he above 50%? It's sort of a similar story that we saw for Donald Trump back in 2016, and as we all saw, Donald Trump got less than 50% of the vote in 2016. We'll talk about that election when we talk about the viability for Evan McMullin in this race. But like I said, they would put the independents, Democrats, and Republicans all together. And OH Predictive Insights found that in those matchups, Mike Lee would win by 13 points, 10 points, a significant narrowing down relative to his last election. McMullin would routinely place second. When you found the combined vote, you saw Evan McMullin either beating Mike Lee or coming very close to beating him. The most recent number from February 14th, McMullin at 23, Schmidt at 11, Lee at 36. Combined vote share is a 2-point lead for Mike Lee. Well, now you can get rid of the Democrats forever. And what do we find? Numbers in a head-to-head matchup, the first of their caliber, the first of their type in the state of Utah, a June 4th poll that shows that in a head-to-head matchup between Mike Lee and Evan McMullin, McMullin loses by 4 points. Just 4 points. This is the state of Utah. The fact that anyone who's not a Republican is above 37% is quite surprising. While McMullin is getting exactly where Biden was back in 2020, keep in mind where we are right now. The nation disapproves of Biden by 13. The state of Utah disapproves of him, Biden being him, by 30 points plus. Utah doesn't like Biden. They didn't like him before. They definitely don't like him now. The nation is against Biden. The nation is for Republicans, at least on the national generic ballot. What do you say about a state that is about 20 to 30 points more Republican than the rest of the nation? Does it make sense for McMullin to be matching where Biden was? It doesn't, which means that McMullin is more than likely getting a lot of this vote from conservatives, Republican voters, who aren't happy with Mike Lee and want to see a conservative elected. McMullin is not a Democrat, and voters recognize that. There's a reason why he got a significant portion of the vote back in the 2016 presidential election. McMullin got 22% of the vote as someone who'd entered into the race a lot later than Clinton and Trump, and also had no real indication that he was going to be able to be a victor in the state of Utah until the very end of the campaign season. McMullin was a nobody, plain and simple, and now he's the technical Democratic independent and all other party nominee for U.S. Senate in the state of Utah in 2022. Evan McMullin is doing well because of what he did back in 2016. He took advantage of that vote that was saying, I want a conservative, I want a Republican that isn't Donald Trump. And luckily for McMullin, voters now view Mike Lee as that same Trump Republican. And that's where this base is coming from. I can guarantee you most of it right now is from the Democratic Party, because about 1 in 4 voters in Utah routinely vote for Democrats, if not more. And a lot of that is fueling Evan McMullin. But you can't also say that McMullin would be at 37% without some Republican vote. There simply isn't enough Democratic votes to get him at 37%. But the other number that's even more shocking is not that Evan McMullin is where Biden was back in 2020, but that Mike Lee is at 41%. The 2020 presidential election shows you that in the state of Utah, Donald Trump received 58% of the vote. In 2012, Romney received 73% of the vote. This senator is at 41%. Voters in the state of Utah clearly are not happy enough with Mike Lee to immediately say they are voting for him. I don't doubt that Mike Lee will win this general election. I think he will win this general election. And I think that some people are going to say and take this video out of context and say that I believe Evan McMullin is going to win this race, or that the independents are going to win. I think Mike Lee will win by about 10 to 15 points. But what I am going to say is that this is a testament to the fact that Donald Trump isn't exactly this bump or benefit to all Republicans in all parts of the country. Because there are many states, like Utah, and many swing districts, swing states, that have rejected Trump before, or clearly pushed against him. Utah swung by 20 points to the left from 2012 for a reason in 2016. That doesn't happen because the Democrats did considerably better, or typically, it didn't happen because Democrats did considerably better. Hillary Clinton lost the election. The state of Utah right now is a very Republican state, and Mike Lee is still pulling out ahead in this 1-to-1 matchup. But it's still close, and that's the story of it all. The association with Trump made Lee unpopular. This is essentially just the primary that was meant to occur way back further. McMullin didn't want to enter the Republican primary because he knew that his journey and his race would end a lot earlier in a convention rather in a general election. McMullin, surprisingly enough, is coming close to being a very good candidate for independents and those who are against Lee across the state. The only real problem is just that Lee has so much room to fall. You take a look at his last election and what do you find? Well, the state of Utah overwhelmingly voted for him in the past. That's because he had always been a Republican that they liked, that they adored. He won by 41 points back in 2016, which means Lee can really afford to lose a significant portion of the vote before he gets to an actual point where he ends up losing the Senate race. That's because Utah, again, is an overwhelmingly conservative state. But McMullin has shown us surprises before. McMullin has done very well back in the state of Utah. Enough so that in 2016, FiveThirtyEight gave Evan McMullin 13.5%. At a chance at victory in the state of Utah, gave Hillary Clinton a 3.3% chance. McMullin did much better than anyone could have imagined, from someone of his caliber who had entered into the race so late, who had risen to the possibility at victory so late. He didn't outperform Clinton. But I will also point out one thing as we look to this Senate race. 2016 was the year of McMullin. It was the year of Clinton and Trump. When voters were disgruntled with Trump and conservative, they voted for McMullin. If they didn't like either and they were Democrats, they voted for Clinton. Add up the vote share between Hillary Clinton and Evan McMullin. What do you find? That combined force defeats Donald Trump in the state of Utah. What do you find? That the state of Utah could have gone blue or could have gone to an independent in 2016 had you combined the vote shares and removed someone out of the running. That's what the Utah Democratic Party wants to do now. That's what they want to do for 2022, and that's what McMullin wants and knows was the only possible way at victory. McMullin has a fighting chance because it has been proven mathematically and just by polling numbers that McMullin has had at one point a combined vote share enough to defeat a Republican. This time, he won't be fighting against the Democratic Party. In fact, he will have the complete and total endorsement of the Utah Democratic Party. Mike Lee, on the other hand, will simply have many Republicans, but also many others who are disgruntled, upset with his association with President Trump, and lack of ability to serve them in Congress in the way that they had predicted. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 Senate election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.